So I want to talk about something that really pisses me off, and that's delisted games. Games that you literally cannot buy anymore. They're just pretty much gone, pulled from storefronts, and like fucking erased from existence. At least what the publishers try to do, so you can buy the inferior remastered version of the game for full price. But there's a lot more to it too. So if you didn't buy the games when they were available, well, tough shit, you're out of luck. You can't play them legally, they're lost. And this is becoming a bigger and bigger problem in gaming. And I don't think enough people are talking about how serious this is. And I'm not just talking about obscure indie games that sold 12 copies. I'm talking about big, well-known games, classic games, games that were hugely popular, defined genres, games that people want to play, that new generations of gamers should be able to experience. But they can't, because the games are delisted. And that's a tragedy. That's us losing our history of amazing single-player titles, losing the freaking art. So I want to break down why this happens, why it matters, and why platforms like GOG are so incredibly important for game preservation. Because this isn't really just for, being able to play specific old games, but more about preserving an entire medium. And I think this is something every gamer should care about. Let's start with the basics. What does it mean for a game to be delisted? It means it's been removed from digital storefronts. You can't buy it on Steam or PlayStation Store or Xbox Store or anywhere else. If you already own it, you can usually still download and play it. But if you don't own it, you're screwed. And depending on the game and the platform, sometimes even if you owned it, you might lose access. Like if a server shuts down or a licensing deal expires, sometimes games just vanish from your library entirely, and that's terrifying. And this is happening more and more. Like every year, dozens, if not hundreds of games get delisted. Some of them are small games that nobody's heard of, but some of them are major titles. Games that were huge when they came out, games that people still want to play, and they're just gone. You can't get them, not legally anyway. Okay, so why does this happen? There are a few main reasons, and some of them are understandable, but some of them are just straight up corporate greed bullshit. First, licensing issues. This is probably the most common reason games get delisted, and it's also one of the most frustrating. See, a lot of games use licensed content. Licensed music, licensed cars, licensed characters, whatever. And those licenses have expiration dates. The developer or publisher pays for the right to use that content for a certain period of time, and when that period ends, they either have to renew the license or pull the game. And renewing licenses costs money. Sometimes a lot of money, especially if the content has become more valuable since the original deal was made. So sometimes publishers look at an old game that's not selling many copies anymore, and they're like, is it worth paying to renew these licenses? And the answer is often no, so they just let the game get delisted. They don't update it to remove the licensed content, they don't try to work out a new deal, they just pull it. And that game is gone forever. And this affects so many games. Racing games are the worst for this. Like any racing game with real cars and real music is basically on a timer. Forza games get delisted like clockwork. Gran Turismo games, Need for Speed games, they're available for a few years and then boom, delisted, gone. You can't buy them anymore. And it's because of the car licenses and the music licenses expiring. And I get it. I understand the business side of it. But from a preservation standpoint, it's a disaster. These games are part of gaming history. They're important. People want to play them, and they're just vanishing. Then you've got games with licensed properties like movie tie-ins or sports games, like all those Marvel games that got delisted. Spider-Man games, Deadpool, Transformers, they were available and then the licenses expired and now they're gone. Or sports games with player likenesses and team licenses. Every year there's a new version and the old ones eventually get delisted because the licenses expire. And here's the thing that really pisses me off. In a lot of cases, the publishers could renew the licenses. They could keep the games available, but they choose not to because it's not profitable enough. They'd rather you buy the new version. They'd rather force you to move on to the next thing rather than preserve the old thing. And that's just greed, man. That's prioritizing short-term profit over the long-term preservation of art and culture. Which brings me to the second major reason games get delisted, and this one is even more cynical. Remasters and remakes. Like, publishers will intentionally delist the original version of a game so they can sell you a remaster at full price. They'll take the original game off storefronts, maybe shut down the servers if it's multiplayer, and then they'll release a remastered version that's basically the same game with slightly better graphics, and they'll charge you $60 for it. And you can't buy the original anymore. You can't choose the cheaper option. You can't decide if the improvements are worth the price. You're forced to either buy the remaster or not play the game at all. And that's fucked up. That's manufactured scarcity. That's artificially creating demand by removing the alternative. And I'm not saying all remasters are bad. Some of them are genuinely great. Like the Demon's Souls remake on PS5 is incredible. The Resident Evil remakes are fantastic. Those are cases where they actually rebuilt the game from the ground up and made something that feels new and fresh while respecting the original. But a lot of remasters are just lazy cash grabs. They slap on some higher resolution textures and call it a day. And they use it as an excuse to delist the original and charge full price again. And then you've got cases where the remaster is actually worse than the original. Like some games get remastered and they mess up the art style, or they introduce bugs, or they remove features. And you can't even go back and play the original because it's been delisted. You're stuck with the inferior version. And that's insane. And this whole thing is just such a predatory practice. It's putting profit over preservation. It's treating games like disposable products instead of art worth preserving. And it's part of this larger problem in the industry where companies don't give a shit about their legacy. They don't care about preserving their games for future generations. They only care about the next quarter's earnings. Then you've got cases where games get delisted for even more obscure reasons, like publishing rights changing hands. A developer and publisher split up, and neither of them has the clear right to keep selling the game, so it gets pulled until they figure it out. Or a company goes bankrupt and their games just vanish. Or there's a lawsuit and games get pulled as part of the settlement. Or sometimes games just get delisted for no clear reason at all, and the publisher never explains why. And all of this leads to the same result. Games that people want to play become unavailable. Gaming history gets erased. And we're all worse off for it. So why does this matter? Why should we care about old games being delisted? Well, for a bunch of reasons. First, preservation. Games are art. They're a cultural medium. They're part of our history. And just like we preserve movies and books and music, we should be preserving games. Future generations should be able to play and study and experience the games that defined different eras of gaming. Researchers and historians should be able to access these games. Developers should be able to learn from them. And just like you can go to a library and check out a book from 50 years ago, or watch a movie from the 1950s, you should be able to play a game from the 2000s, or the 1990s, or the 1980s. But we're not doing that. We're letting games disappear. And once they're gone, they're gone. Yeah, piracy exists, and you can probably find ROMs or cracked versions of delisted games if you know where to look, but that's not a solution. That's not preservation. That's just individuals desperately trying to hold on to things that should be legally and readily available. Second, accessibility. Like, not everyone can afford to buy every game when it comes out. Some people discover games years later. Some people weren't even gaming when certain games were released, and they should be able to access those games. But if games get delisted after a few years, new players are locked out. They missed the window. Too bad. And that's not fair. And this is especially important for younger gamers. Like, if you're 15 years old right now, there are probably amazing games from the mid-2000s that you never got to play because they were delisted before you even started gaming. And that sucks. You're missing out on important parts of gaming history because corporations decided those games weren't profitable enough to keep available. Third, and this is more philosophical, but like, who gets to decide which games are worth preserving? Right now, it's corporations. It's publishers looking at spreadsheets and profit margins. And if a game isn't selling enough copies, they'll delist it, even if it's culturally important, even if it's beloved by a dedicated fan base, even if it represents an important moment in gaming history. But that's not how preservation should work. We don't let movie studios decide which films get preserved based on profitability. We have archives and libraries and restoration projects that preserve films regardless of their commercial success. We recognize that cultural value isn't the same as commercial value, but in gaming, we haven't figured that out yet. We're letting corporations control our history, and they're doing a terrible job of it. And this is where PC gaming and platforms like GOG become absolutely crucial. So let's talk about GOG. GOG stands for Good Old Games, and it's a digital storefront owned by CD Projekt, and their whole philosophy is built around game preservation and ownership. Like when you buy a game on GOG, you actually own it. It's DRM free, you can download the installer and keep it forever. You can back it up, you can install it on any computer, you don't need to be connected to the internet, you don't need to log into a client, you just have the game. And that's huge for preservation, because even if GOG shuts down tomorrow, you still have your games. You downloaded the installers, you backed them up, they're yours. Compare that to Steam or other platforms where if the platform goes down or if a publisher pulls a game, you might lose access. With GOG, you can't lose access because you physically have the game files. And GOG focuses heavily on older games. They track down the rights holders for classic games and work to get them back on sale. They update them to work on modern operating systems. They include all the DLC and extras. They make sure these games are preserved and accessible. And that's incredibly important work. Like, there are so many classic games that were basically lost, that you couldn't play anymore unless you had an old PC and the original disc. And GOG brought them back. They made them available again. They preserved them. And that's the kind of work that needs to happen more broadly across the industry. And this is why PC gaming is so important for preservation. Consoles are closed ecosystems. You're at the mercy of the platform holder. If Sony or Microsoft or Nintendo decides to shut down a store or end support for a console, you lose access to those games. We've seen it happen. The Wii Shop channel shut down. The PS3 and Vita stores almost shut down. And when that happens, games that were only available digitally on those platforms become unavailable. But PC is an open platform. As long as you have the game files, you can run them. Maybe you need some tweaking, maybe you need compatibility modes or community patches, but it's possible. And that openness is crucial for preservation. It means games aren't tied to specific hardware. They can be updated and maintained by the community. They can live on. This is why every game should come to PC, not just for the graphics or the mod support or the wider audience, for preservation. Because putting a game on PC means it has a chance of surviving long term. It means it's not locked to a specific console generation that will eventually become obsolete. It means it can be preserved and played by future generations. And I know some people are like, well, consoles have exclusives, that's part of the business model. And yeah, I get it. But from a preservation standpoint, it's terrible. Every PlayStation exclusive that never came to PC is at risk. If Sony decides to stop supporting it, if licensing issues arise, if the servers shut down, that game could be lost. And that's a problem. And we're already seeing this happen. There are PS3 games that are basically unplayable now because the servers are down and they required online connectivity. There are Xbox 360 games with delisted DLC that you can never get. There are Wii U games that were digital only and might not be preserved if Nintendo shuts down that infrastructure. But on PC, the community can step in. People can create patches, they can host servers, they can preserve games even when the corporations abandon them. That's really the bread and butter for me personally on PC gaming. That's why PC gaming is so important for the long-term health of the medium. Now, let me be clear. I'm not saying consoles are bad or that you shouldn't play on consoles. I play on consoles. I love consoles. But from a preservation perspective, PC is superior because of its openness and longevity. And this all comes back to the fundamental question, who owns games? Like, when you buy a game, do you own it, or are you just licensing access to it? Because right now, the industry is moving more and more toward the licensing model. You don't own games, you own licenses that can be revoked. Your library is at the mercy of corporate decisions, and that's a huge problem. And once again, GOG fights against that. They say, no, when you buy a game, you own it. Here's the DRM-free installer. Just frickin' store it in your hard drive if you want in a basement, keep it forever. Unless your house gets flooded, so be careful about that. But anyway, it's yours. Keep it forever. And more platforms need to adopt that philosophy. We need to push back against the idea that games are just temporary licenses. We need to demand ownership. Because here's the thing. Gaming is still a relatively young medium. We're only like 50 years into video game history, and we're already losing huge chunks of it. Games are disappearing. And if we don't fix this now, if we don't start taking preservation seriously, we're going to lose so much more. Imagine if 50 years from now, someone wants to study the history of gaming. Like, they want to understand how games evolved, what people were playing, what was popular and influential. And huge swaths of that history are just lost. They can't access them. They can't play them. They can only read about them. That would be a tragedy. And it's where we're headed if we don't change course. And look, let me give you a perfect example of why PC is so crucial for this. The Uncharted games, the God of War trilogy, Shadow of Colossus, and so many more. But like, specifically Uncharted 1, 2, and 3. These are some of the most iconic PlayStation exclusives ever made. My favorite games of all time too, by the way, and they defined the PS3 generation. They're masterpieces of action-adventure design. Everyone should be able to play them. And Sony knows this. So what do? They remastered them for PS4, the Nathan Drake collection. Okay, cool, that makes sense. New console generation, update the games, make them available to PS4 players. Great, but then the PS5 came out, and you know what? Those remastered PS4 versions work on PS5 through backward compatibility. So that's fine, for now, but like, what happens with PS6? Are they going to remaster them again? The Nathan Drake collection? And then what, PS7, another remaster? PS8? PS9? Like, how long can this cycle continue? At what point does it become absurd that you have to keep rebuying or re-releasing the same games every console generation? And more importantly, what happens when Sony eventually decides it's not worth it anymore? What happens when they're like, you know what? These games are too old. Nobody cares anymore. We're not going to bother porting them to PS7. Those games are stuck on old hardware, and eventually that hardware fails. Eventually those digital stores shut down. And then what? The PS3 store is already basically on life support. Sony tried to shut it down completely, and they only walked it back because of massive backlash. But it's going to shut down eventually, and when it does, any PS3 games that didn't get remastered or ported are gone. Sure, if you have the physical disc and a working PS3, you can still play them, but how long is that going to last? PS3s are already breaking down. The disk drives fail. The processors overheat. In 20 years, how many working PS3s are going to exist? In 50 years? And this is the fundamental problem with console exclusives. They're trapped on specific hardware, and that hardware has a shelf life. And yes, Sony can keep remastering games for new consoles, but that's not a preservation strategy. That's a business strategy. They're reselling you games you already bought. And they're only going to do it for the games that are profitable enough to justify the effort. The big hits, the major franchises, all the smaller games, the cult classics, the weird experimental stuff, that's going to be left behind. But if Uncharted 1, 2, and 3 were on PC, this wouldn't be an issue. You could still play them today on modern hardware. You wouldn't need a remaster. PC is backward compatible by nature. Yeah, sometimes you need community patches or compatibility modes to get really old games running on modern systems, but it's doable. People are still playing games from the 90s on PC. You can boot up Half-Life or Baldur's Gate or Deus Ex right now on a modern PC and play them. No remaster needed, no special hardware needed. They just work, or they can be made to work with minimal effort, and that's the power of PC as a platform. It's not locked to specific hardware generations. It's open, it's flexible, it evolves, but it maintains compatibility. You don't lose access to games just because new hardware came out. And yeah, emulation exists. Like, eventually people will emulate PS3 and PS4 and PS5. They're already doing it. RPCS3 can run PS3 games. There are early PS4 emulators in development, and that's great for preservation. That's the community stepping in where corporations failed, but emulation isn't a perfect solution. It requires technical knowledge. It's often finicky. Performance can be inconsistent. Most people aren't going to bother. They're not going to download an emulator and hunt down ROMs and troubleshoot compatibility issues. They just want to play the game. But if Uncharted was natively on PC, you just buy it on Steam or GOG, you download it, you play it, done. No emulation, no hardware hunting, no rebuying the same game every console generation. You own it. You can play it now, you can play it in 10 years, you can play it in 30 years. As long as PCs exist, you can play it. And this applies to so many PlayStation exclusives. The Last of Us, God of War, Bloodborne, Demon's Souls, the Infamous games, the Resistance games, the Killzone games, Gravity Rush, The Order 1886, all of these amazing games that are trapped on PlayStation hardware. Some of them have come to PC recently, which is fantastic. The Last of Us, God of War, Spider-Man, Horizon, those are all on PC now, and that's great for preservation. But so many others are still locked to PlayStation, and they're at risk. Same thing with Xbox exclusives, though Microsoft has been way better about bringing their stuff to PC. Most Xbox games come to PC now through the Windows Store or Steam. Halo, Gears of War, Forza, they're all on PC, and that's the right move. That's prioritizing accessibility and preservation over short-term hardware sales. And Nintendo is the worst about this. Like, Nintendo actively fights game preservation. They shut down ROM sites, they issue takedowns, they let their own games go out of print and become unavailable, and then they get mad when people try to preserve them through emulation. And so many incredible Nintendo games are just stuck on old hardware that's getting harder and harder to find and maintain. And Nintendo's solution is to occasionally re-release a handful of games on their new console at full price. And now, I just want to talk about some specific games that were delisted and really hurt me the most personally. Like one of the most important and shocking games ever made, Spec Ops: The Line. This game came out in 2012, and it's one of the most important games ever made from a narrative perspective. Like, this isn't just some random shooter. This is a game that actively criticizes military shooters and the player's relationship with violence in games. It's basically a deconstruction of the entire Call of Duty America Saves the Day military shooter genre, and it's brilliant. The game is inspired by Heart of Darkness and Apocalypse Now, and it puts you in the situation where you think you're the hero, you think you're doing the right thing, but you're actually committing war crimes. And the game makes you feel like shit about it. There's this famous white phosphorus scene where you're forced to use a horrific weapon on what you think are enemy combatants, and then you walk through the aftermath and realize you just killed a bunch of civilians. And the game doesn't let you off the hook. It's not like, oops, accident, move on. It's like, no, you did this. Look at what you did. You're a monster. And the loading screen tips change as the game goes on. At first, they're normal game tips, but later they start saying things like, do you feel like a hero yet? And this is all your fault. It's breaking the fourth wall. And it got delisted in 2021. You can't buy it anymore on Steam or anywhere else. And I think the reason is almost certainly licensing issues. The game uses a bunch of licensed music, and those licenses expired, and 2K Games decided it wasn't worth renewing them, so they just pulled the game. And this is a tragedy, man. This is one of those games that should be required playing for anyone interested in game narratives or game criticism. And yeah, if you own it, you can still download it from your Steam library. But what about people who weren't gaming in 2012? But like, what the hell for people who heard about this game years later and wanted to try it? This is exactly the kind of game that needs to be preserved. Like, worst case scenario, patch the music out and keep selling the game. It's not ideal, but it's better than the game disappearing entirely. But instead, 2K just gave up, and we all lost access to an important piece of gaming culture. And speaking of licensed games getting delisted, let's talk about the Marvel situation. Because this is a perfect example of how licensing deals can absolutely destroy game preservation. X-Men Origins Wolverine came out in 2009, and here's the thing, it's way better than it has any right to be. Like, the movie was terrible, but the game was actually really good. It was this super violent, brutal action game where you play as Wolverine and you just tear through enemies. It was gory, it was satisfying, it had a decent story, it was legitimately fun, and it's been delisted for years. You can't get it anywhere. The Marvel license expired, Activision didn't renew it, boom, gone. Same with Deadpool. That game came out in 2013, and it was this over-the-top, fourth-wall-breaking action game that totally captured the spirit of the character. It had Deadpool talking to the player, making fun of game tropes, breaking the game intentionally. It was hilarious. It wasn't a masterpiece of game design, but it was a really fun, unique experience. And it got delisted in 2014, brought back briefly in 2015 around the time the first Deadpool movie came out, and then delisted again in 2017. It's gone now. You can't play it unless you already own it or you hunt down a physical copy for an old console. And the Spider-Man situation is even worse because there have been so many Spider-Man games over the years, and most of them are unavailable now. Spider-Man 2 from 2004, that movie tie-in game, is considered one of the best superhero games ever made. The web swinging was incredible. It set the standard that the recent Insomniac games built on. And you can't play it anymore. Not easily. It never came to PC, it's stuck on PS2, Xbox, and GameCube. Good luck finding a working copy. The Amazing Spider-Man 1 and 2 games from 2012 and 2014, also delisted. Spider-Man Shattered Dimensions, delisted. Spider-Man Edge of Time, delisted. All of these games, gone because Activision's Marvel license expired and they didn't renew it. And here's what really pisses me off about this. These aren't just random games. Spider-Man is one of the most popular characters in the world. These games have fan bases. People want to play them. And many of them never even came to PC, so there's no easy way to preserve them. They're trapped on old console hardware that's getting harder to maintain. And also, why not just talk about infamous Ubisoft blunder? The Crew, and Ubisoft's absolutely dystopian decision to not just delist it, but to remove it from people's libraries entirely. So, The Crew was a racing game that came out in 2014. It was an always online game, which was already problematic from a preservation standpoint, but whatever. It was a live service game, people understood that going in. The game had a sequel, The Crew 2, and then another game, The Crew Motorfest, came out in 2023. And in 2024, Ubisoft decided to shut down The Crew's servers. Okay, fine, the game is 10 years old, it has 2 sequels, I get it. But here's where it gets fucked up. When they shut down the servers, the game became completely unplayable. It was always online, so without the servers, you can't play it at all, not even the single-player content. It's just dead. But it gets worse. Ubisoft didn't just make the game unplayable, they removed it from people's libraries. If you bought The Crew, if you paid for it, Ubisoft went into your Ubisoft Connect library and deleted it. It's just gone. You can't download it, you can't access it. You paid for a product and they took it away from you. And this set a terrible precedent, because now other publishers see that Ubisoft did this and got away with it. Yeah, there was backlash, yeah, people were mad, but there were no real consequences. Ubisoft didn't have to refund people, they didn't get sued successfully, they just did it. Another gaming company, and one of my favorite back in the day I want to talk about, is Telltale Games. Telltale was known for their episodic adventure games, The Walking Dead, The Wolf Among Us, Tales from the Borderlands, Batman, Game of Thrones, all these narrative-driven, choice-based games. And they were hugely influential. The Walking Dead basically defined modern narrative adventure games. It proved that games could tell emotionally powerful stories that rivaled TV and film. But Telltale had a lot of licensed games, and when Telltale shut down in 2018, a bunch of those games got delisted. Jurassic Park the game, that was one of the first to go. It was delisted even before Telltale fully shut down. And then when the company went under, there was this period of uncertainty where nobody knew what would happen to their catalog. Eventually, a new company bought the Telltale name and some of the rights, and they brought back some of the games. The Walking Dead is available again, The Wolf Among Us is available, Batman is available, but not everything came back. And even the ones that did come back, there was a period where they were just gone. And if you hadn't bought them, too bad. And here's the thing with episodic games. They're especially vulnerable to this. Because if you bought episode 1 and then the company goes under before you can buy the rest, you're screwed. You have an incomplete game. And even if the whole season is available, if it gets delisted and you only own part of it, you can't complete your collection. Jurassic Park the game is particularly frustrating because it's actually a pretty cool game. It's set during the events of the first Jurassic Park film, and it tells this parallel story about what was happening to other characters on the island. It has that telltale choice and consequence system. It's a solid narrative experience, and it's been delisted for years. Back to the Future the game, same deal. It was a Telltale game with Christopher Lloyd reprising his role as Doc Brown. It was a love letter to the films, and it's been delisted. These games should be preserved. They're part of Telltale's legacy. They're part of gaming history. But licensing issues made them disappear, and now they're hard to access. And those are just some of the major examples. There are literally hundreds of other delisted games. Let me just rattle off some of them. More licensed games, Transformers games, War for Cybertron, Fall of Cybertron, Devastation, all delisted when Activision's license expired. These were great games, especially the High Moon Studios ones, and they're gone. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles games, the 2013 game, the Activision one, delisted. The Simpsons game, delisted. Scott Pilgrim vs. the World. This was delisted for years, thankfully it came back, but there was a long period where you just couldn't get it. Music games. This whole genre is a graveyard. Guitar Hero games, DJ Hero, Band Hero, most of them delisted due to music licenses expiring. Rock Band games, same deal. Some are still available, but many delisted songs and even whole games. Racing games. So many racing games get delisted. Pretty much every Forza Motorsport and Forza Horizon game gets delisted after a few years. Forza Motorsport 5, 6, 7, all delisted. Forza Horizon 1, 2, 3, delisted. Project Gotham racing games, delisted. Need for Speed games, several of them delisted or removed from certain platforms. Grid games, some delisted. Sports games, this is ongoing. Every year, new FIFA or EA Sports games come out, and old ones eventually get delisted. Same with Madden, NBA 2K, NHL, all of them. The old versions just disappear after a few years. Other notable delistings? Alan Wake was delisted for years due to music licensing, thankfully came back, but there was a long period where you couldn't get it. Darkspore, an EA game that was always online, and when they shut down the servers, the game became completely unplayable. It's dead. PT, the Silent Hills demo from Kojima. This got pulled from the PlayStation Store, and if you didn't download it when it was available, you can never play it. People were literally selling PS4s with PT installed for thousands of dollars. Metal Gear Solid games on PC. Several of them have been delisted from Steam at various points due to licensing issues. TMNT, Arkham-style games by Platinum Games. Gone. Alpha Protocol was delisted for years, came back recently, but there was a long unavailability period. Prey, 2006, the original Prey, not the Arkham one, was delisted due to rights issues. No One Lives Forever 1 and 2, these incredible spy games from the early 2000s are in legal limbo. Nobody knows who owns the rights, so they can't be re-released. The Darkness 1 and 2, delisted. Asura's Wrath, delisted. Lollipop Chainsaw was delisted, came back as a remaster, but the original is gone. Blur, a great racing game from Bizarre Creations, delisted. Split Second, another great racing game, delisted. And this list just goes on and on. I could literally spend another hour listing delisted games. It's everywhere. It's constant. Games are disappearing all the time, and most people don't even notice until they go to buy something and realize it's gone. And this is the crisis we're facing. This is why games need to come to PC. This is why we need to demand better from publishers and platform holders. So support preservation efforts. Demand PC ports of old games. Buy DRM free when you can. Back up your games. Speak out against anti-consumer practices. Make noise when games get delisted.